So welcome to the exam 3 review session. In this exam review session, we're going to cover the cardiovascular system, which technically is 3 chapters. It's going to include blood, heart, blood vessels, and then we'll go into the respiratory system and then the digestive system. So even though it's kind of 3 units, it's technically 5 chapters, okay? So as always, they're going to be divided evenly amongst the 50 questions. So with the lecture portion, 50 questions, and they're going to be divided evenly between the chapters. 40 of the first set of questions that you'll see are multiple choice. 10 are fill in the blank. So if I met with you and we talked about which type of questions you struggled the most on, so some of you will start with, start in the order from 1 to 50. Others, I recommend to do the last 10 first and then move up to finish the other 40. So kind of keep that in mind as you go through this exam, okay? In terms of time, you have 15 minutes. That's 15 minutes, unless you have extended test taking time. If you do have extended test taking time, make sure that when you click on the exam, it will always let you know how much time that you have, and it should show your extended test taking time. If it doesn't, do not enter it. Email me or actually text me right away, and then I'll figure out what's going on with the settings. But it should all be set up now. So that's 15 minutes. It's going to cover the blood, heart, blood vessels, respiratory system, and digestive system. Any questions about the lecture exam? And it's situated, as all your other exams have been. It's going to start with blood, then move into heart, blood vessels, respiratory, and end with digestive. So it's all kind of, the questions are together, okay? Any questions on the lecture exam? All right. Then for the lab, there will be 30 questions, and they're all fill in the blanks. Or, type in the answers. Identification. Now, as we move into these 3 units, you can see that the structures are a lot more detailed. So make sure that whatever is a part of its name appears on your answer. And there are multiple names to one structure. So if that's the case, just pick one. Don't mix between the 2. And the rule of thumb is that however it's listed in the PDF, that's how you know it is what it is, okay? So there are some older terminologies for these terms, and unless it's the terms in the PDF, you may lose points for that, okay? Because the PDF does use the terms that are used in the textbook, so it's more of the common, most recent terms, and that's why we're looking for the terms that you find in your lab PDFs, okay? Spelling counts. Okay. And particularly now, if there's a pair of something, make sure you indicate whether it's right or left. If it's a portion of a larger structure, then maybe include the fact that it's the lobe of the right lung, for example. Okay, so be specific. Okay. What else? For this one, you will have 45 minutes. Okay. Any questions on the lab?
Yes. So when you say that for finding the terms on the PDF, so that means we're more leaning towards what's said in the script rather than the video modules, because sometimes that I've seen that they have some like misspellings and stuff, right?
Yes. Yep. And if there are spelling errors, it should tell you. I try to, because the videos are really hard to fix because you'd have to go in and fix everything. So what I try to do is I put notes at the end of the videos, or at the bottom of the video, say there's a spelling error here. This is the correct spelling. But the the rule of thumb is you go by the PDF. Yeah, that's a great question.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I'm not able to see the chat, so if you did put something in the chat, if someone could read that off for me, that'd be greatly appreciated.
He just wrote that, Professor, what's the best recommendation you can give us to study the exam and score a high score?
Right. Okay. So it's pretty much the same thing. So do the 5-day plan. So if you look back at the information, the weekly emails, as well as the kind of the emails that are sent out prior to each exam, you know, the suggestions are to break it down into chunks instead of studying everything, a little bit of this chapter, a little bit of this, and all in one day, divide it into days. So we have what's called the 5-day plan. Okay, so if you divide it up and study just that chapter, it keeps it straight in your mind. And at this point, you should be reviewing a lot of materials that you've already created while you're studying them during the week that they were assigned. So at this point, you should be doing, you know, if you really wanted to test your knowledge, you could do the study guide. But I think more specifically, what would be more helpful would be the worksheets. Because the worksheets go into more detail than the study guide does, to be honest. The study guide just kind of provides everything you need to know, kind of the learning objectives for that chapter, but the worksheets would be like, okay, specifically list these things in order, okay? Or identify the lining of each of these structures. So the worksheets actually would be what I would highly recommend. And, you know, I talked to a lot of folks on doing the worksheets. When you do the worksheets, you only need to print it out once, but do it twice. The first time that you do it without your notes, because that's going to let you know what you, of all the things that you studied, what can you recall without having to rely on your notes. The second time you go over it, then you use your notes. So with notes. So the first time without notes, the second time with notes. That's going to allow your brain to kind of see of everything you've studied, what could you recall and what haven't you yet been able to recall. So the things that you haven't been able to recall, in other words, the things that you were able to write only with the help of your notes, that's the thing that you really want to focus on studying. Focus on reviewing. Okay, because remember, doing well on an exam has 3 parts. 1, you have to put it into your brain, and you have to put it in a way that's organized, so it's easy for your brain to kind of separate all the information, because I know that anatomy and physiology is a lot of content. And that's why, you know, doing those cognitive maps, doing the worksheets really help to kind of put things in kind of organized way. The second part is to practice your recall. Practice seeing if you can pull that information out. So that's where when you do those flashcards, Quizlets, or have someone quiz you, that's what you're practicing there. And then the third part about doing well is test taking strategies. You know, and after every review, I go through sample test questions or sample quiz questions, and I model how you should take it. Use process of elimination, you know, find your answers before, you know, come up with your answer before you read the answer options, as a way to build your confidence and not second guess yourself. Spend enough time on each question and then answer it and then move on. Don't go back, because oftentimes when students move back, studies show that they tend to change the answer from the correct answer to the incorrect answer. So there's those 3 buckets of what you need to be able to do well to do well on the exam. Okay, but do the 5-day plan. Divide it up, like on Monday, or actually now you have Tuesday, right? Tuesday, I'm going to do the cardiovascular. Wednesday, I'm going to do respiratory. Thursday, I'm going to do digestive. Friday, I'm going to review. Okay, so use the 5-day plan to kind of break it up. All right. So logistics. Okay. I notice more than not, and this third exam, I'm going to check everybody's video before I wait for respondents lockdown to let me know which one to really focus on. this time in preparation for your final exam, which I will be checking everybody's video in the final exam, I'm going to have to check it in this exam, okay? Because I notice a lot of students are looking down, or they do environmental scans that, you know, does move right and left, but I'm not really seeing your surrounding, like what's on your table. So it can't, the point of the environmental scan is to protect you. So if anything happens and there's a question of whether, you know, there was academic disintegrity or not, that environmental scan, you know, the better you make it, the more protection you have against that, you know, that accusation. So scan everywhere, you know, leave me with no doubt that there was nothing around you. And just so you remember, all these exams are closed notes. You cannot use any resources, and you can't even have your cell phone next to you, okay? All right, so the logistics is to make sure you do a proper, so of course you're gonna have to use respondus lockdown. Do your environmental scan. And again, make sure you do a very thorough environmental scan to show me that there's nothing around you, okay? And this time in that weekly message, I even gave you a link to an example of what a thorough environmental scan would look like. And then your webcam.
Yeah, that link didn't work for me.
Oh no. Okay, thank you for letting me know. I will fix that link, and I will send out another email. Fix an email link. Okay, I'm gonna have to go back to and admit somebody really quick. Okay. All right. So thank you for letting me know. I'll do that tonight, and I will get that out tonight. Fix an email link. Okay. So that's the logistics: respondus lockdown, environmental scan, and of course webcam. And I will send you the link to the environmental scan example. Okay. Any questions about the exam 3? All right. And also just a reminder that you do have 2 TAs now. I have to introduce you to Morgan, but Emma and Morgan are the 2 TAs for this course. So please make use of them. You can also contact me. I'm more than willing to do extra reviews if you have any questions. So just email either any one of us, any one of the 3 of us. Okay. All right. Any questions before I move on? Okay. I know I have some assignments that I have to submit for you still. So I know that in one of the sections I have 2 assignments left, but in the other one I have 4. So I promise you by the end of this week, everything will be graded. So you'll have everything. So that's the assignments. What else do I need to, announcements do I need to make? I think that's it. Okay. Let's get started. So for the cardiovascular, cardiovascular includes blood, heart, and blood vessel. And we'll start off with blood. I know there are specific questions on functions of the cardiovascular. That one's kind of hard to go into because when you talk about cardiovascular, it includes blood, heart, and blood vessel. So it's easier to break it down into those 3 chapters and then talk about their individual function. So we'll start with blood. What's the function of blood?
Thermoregulation.
Yep. How?
Because it brings bloods to.
I think you may have gotten cut up. So cut off in your audio. So could you repeat that?
Oh, sure. Because of bringing pumping blood through the muscles.
Close. So it's thermoregulation because what is the main component of blood?
Oxygen.
Blood,
sorry.
no, you're somewhat right. So let's make sure we clarify that. So
Mhm.
in blood, you do have red blood cells. Okay,
Mhm.
you're right. You do have red blood cells, and red blood cells does carry oxygen. But in blood, you also have white blood cells, and you have what else?
Oh, plasma.
Yes, and what's plasma mostly made up of?
Water.
And what can water carry?
Water can carry
What happens if you boil water?
gases.
It becomes hot, right? So
Yes.
water can carry heat.
Mm.
Okay, so thermoregulation in the way in such that it can carry heat. So one of the main functions of blood is it's transports, right? So it can transport things like what? Can you list it off for me?
Nutrients, gases, wastes, hormones, and antibodies.
Perfect. Nutrients, waste, gases, and the particular it carries lots of gases, right? But of all the gases it carries, there are two that we care about, and that's oxygen and carbon dioxide. Water, hormones, etc. Essentially, it's the body's highway. It carries everything. Okay, so blood vessels are the body's highway, which then carries the blood, and blood then transports everything essentially. Okay, what else does blood do, or does blood function in?
Protection?
Yeah, how?
Like your immune response?
Yep, how? What's a component in blood that does that?
Um,
White blood cells.
Yes, ma'am. White
Antibodies?
blood cells and
red blood cells?
red blood cells more function in the transportation of gases.
Okay.
But what else? So in your white blood cell, you have things like lymphocytes, neutrophils, all that good stuff that provides protection. But you also have what? Besides white blood cells. I'll give you a clue. It helps you to stop bleeding.
Platelets.
Yes. Yep. Excellent. You have platelets. Okay, so those are ways in which blood provides protection is through the white blood cells, the platelets. Okay. Another function, please.
What antibodies? Is antibodies in that?
In the protection, absolutely. Because antibodies help you to identify what is a part of your body and what is not a part of your body.
Stop.
So what's another function of blood?
Regulation.
Yes. And what are a few things that it regulates?
pH.
pH.
Yes, pH, exactly, because it's going to carry what?
The fluid, like it's going to carry the water and acids and buffers the acids and bases.
Perfect. And that's why it regulates pH, right? Because it carries the hydrogen ions. Okay? What else besides pH? You mentioned water, so that would be blood volume.
Would it also regulate red blood cells through hemopoiesis?
Yes, absolutely. Yep. That one I'm going to save more towards a specific function of when we go through the red blood cells. But the general functions of blood, we'll just say that it regulates values like pH, blood volume, and so on. Okay? So the one that you mentioned is a mechanism of regulation of negative feedback specifically. But it's more when we get to the red blood cells. Okay? All right. So the components of blood then, a nice way to study the components of blood is by doing a hematocrit. So the hematocrit is you would poke someone's finger, take their blood and put it into a vial, and then you put it into this machine called a centrifuge. You put the tubes in there, and the tubes spin. And when the tubes spin, the components of blood is going to separate based on density. Okay, so 55% of the blood is going to be what?
Plasma.
Yeah. Less than 1.
The platelets
Yep. And what else?
and white blood cells.
That's right. So overall, we call that the buffy coat, and you're absolutely right. It contains the white blood cells and the platelets, because you're not really supposed to have a lot of those, right? And if you do have a lot of them, what does it indicate?
Infection.
Exactly. So then 45% that goes on the bottom, because it's the most dense, are going to be your,
The red blood.
Red blood cells.
that's right. Okay. So the components of blood then include the plasma, the red blood cells, the white blood cells, and the platelets. Okay. All right. So of the components of blood, we're going to start with the red blood cells. I want to save enough time to go through the other functions of the cardiovascular as well as blood flow. So I'm just going to go through this very briefly, okay? But I did start recording my lectures at this point, so you can always go to the announcements page and go into my actual class lectures. Okay, if you're not quite comfortable with this material yet, so just go and watch it. But so just for briefly, I'm just going to go through red blood cells. Okay, so make sure you know the shape of a red blood cell, how it's biconcave. So on the side view, it looks like this. It has 2 dips inward, and if you look at the top view, it looks like a donut. Okay, and that's because in the center, it's hollow. That's where the nucleus should be. And that means that in an adult red blood cell, there's no nucleus. Makes sense? That's also why it only lives for about 120 days. It can't repair itself. Okay. In addition to not having any nucleus, it also has no mitochondria. It's the only cell in your body that goes through anaerobic respiration throughout all of its life. Because if you think about it, what do mitochondria do?
Produce ATP.
And in order to produce the most amount of ATP, it has to have what?
Energy.
That's what it's producing. So in order to produce it, what does it need? So to answer this question, you have to go back towards the muscles, muscle metabolism, and energy production.
Mm-hmm.
You need
Glucose.
You need glucose, and you need a lot of what? Oxygen.
Ah,
I
yes.
was gonna say that, and I didn't.
You should. You have to be confident. You know your stuff. You have to, okay? And what do red blood cells do? They carry oxygen. So it's just like putting me as a cash register in a candy store. I would eat it before I would sell it. Okay? So that's why red blood cell, if its function is to carry oxygen, you really wouldn't want to give it mitochondria, because the mitochondria would use up the oxygen. Okay, and that's why it has no mitochondria. Okay, all right. And then there's other characteristics. I'm just kind of going through the kind of the bigger ones. Okay, so there's a lot more content in here and more details, but again, to save time, I'm just going to go through it briefly. If you want more detail, go to watch the lecture. Okay, so red blood cells are made up of what? What are the functional units of a red blood cell?
The hemoglobin?
Beautiful, thank you. Hemoglobin has 4 heme groups and globin chains. Okay, hemes, the heme groups, the 4 heme groups, what is their function? What do they do?
Transport carbon dioxide and oxygen.
Close. Only one of those is correct.
Carbon dioxide.
Other one.
Oh, oxygen. When
That's
in
right.
doubt, say oxygen.
That's not wrong. Absolutely. All right. So the heme groups specifically carry the oxygen. Okay, and the reason for that is because the heme groups have a specific element that is a metal that's attached to it. What metal has a high affinity for oxygen, which allows it to carry oxygen?
Iron.
Yeah, exactly. So it's got iron on it, and that's how it's able to carry the oxygen because each heme group contains 1 iron. All right, where the globin chains are responsible for carrying carbon dioxide, and the globin chains are made up of amino acids. Okay, make sure you go through how the life cycle of a red blood cell, how it gets made, and a lot of you did your video on that in terms of hypoxemia, how it gets made, how it gets caught once it becomes damaged, and how it breaks down and how it goes through the process of breakdown, going through your liver, what happens if you have anemia, or if you're a woman, you tend to have more, you become more anemic because you menstruate and so on. So all of that stuff, okay? So to move on, because I want to make sure I cover the things that were asked, make sure you cover plasma, the functions of plasma, the components of plasma, and particularly within the components of plasma, you are responsible for, and there's lots of plasma proteins, but I'm only requiring you to know 3, okay? So make sure you know the 3 plasma proteins that include albumin, fibrinogen, and globulin. And within the globulin, make sure you understand the difference between alpha and beta globulins, and then gamma globulins. Okay, so alpha and beta have similar functions, and gamma has a different function. So make sure you go through the plasma proteins, what they do, how they work. Okay. Then also spend some time on the leukocytes. A good mnemonic that I used when I was going through this class is never let monkeys eat bananas. It gives me neutrophils, lymphocytes, monocytes, eosinophils, basophils, so the 5 white blood cells, and it's also listed from most abundant to least abundant. Another mnemonic that you should know is Benji, B-E-N-G, and that allows me to remember that how I classify leukocytes are those that are granulated and those that are agranulated. Okay, so the ones that are granulated include basophils, eosinophils, and neutrophils. Okay, what does it mean to be granulated? What does it mean to be agranulated? Make sure you know the functions of white blood cells. So, for example, if I were to ask you, okay, I have a bacterial infection, which of the following would be elevated? Which of the following white blood cells would be elevated? What would you say? So if my question was, I have a bacterial infection, what white blood cell would be elevated? In other words, what white blood cell is responsible for fighting off bacterial infections? Make a guess. You have 1 in 5.
Neutrophils?
You are absolutely right.
Oh.
Nice. Neutrophils. And if that didn't sound familiar to you at all, watch the lecture video or review your notes. Okay? Or both. Okay? All right. So for heart, I think there was a question in the chat. Can someone read that for me?
I had a question. I
Okay.
like raised my hand. Sorry. I just wanted to say another way. I was watching a YouTube video. It might help another student, but a good way to remember like leukocytes and is Granny Phil is a site, and it kind of correlates with each one. So the granny, like the granules, granny. Sorry, just like another way. I don't know. It could help like another student maybe. I just wanted to share that.
Absolutely. No, that's perfect. There's anytime any of you have anything like that to share, please share it because I guarantee you it's going to help somebody. Okay. So if that's what you put in the chat, awesome. That means it'll be recorded. If it's not in the chat, can you type it into the chat for me? And that way other students have access to that as well. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. All right. Sorry, Kellyanna. Not Kendall. Okay. Heart. Okay. So let's move on to heart. For the heart, make sure you know the structure and function as well as the blood flow. And that's what we're going to go through next because blood flow was one of the questions. All right. When you're doing blood flow, if you were to follow a molecule of oxygen, for example, okay, or carbon dioxide, whichever one you want to pick. The best way to learn the heart structures is to first divide it into its main parts. Okay, so the first thing I would do is identify the chambers. What are the two chambers that you have?
The left and right atriums
Keep going.
and the left and right ventricles.
Yeah, perfect. And just a quick diagram, and then I'll be right with you. Okay. So the chambers, like you said, are the atriums and the ventricles. Okay, so you have the right atrium over here. Oops, did not mean to do that. Let's do A and A. So you have the right and left atriums. And then you have B down here, the right and left ventricles. Okay, perfect. Then the next thing you're going to identify are the valves. What are the valves? What are the two types of valves that you have?
The aortic and pulmonary valves.
So the aortic and pulmonary are types of semilunar valves.
Oh, sorry. The bicuspid and tricuspid.
Those are types of AV valves.
Ah.
That's why we go through this. So
That's right.
Yeah. So the AV valves, the atrioventricular valves, are after their names. They're found between the atrium and the ventricles, and there's two types. There's the one on the right, which is also known as the tricuspid, because you try before you buy, okay? And it has three flaps, and that's why it's called the tricuspid. And then the one on the left, which is also known as the bicuspid, because it has two flaps, also known as the mitral valve. So if you talk to a doctor like 50 years ago, they would have called it, that was so gender, sorry. They would have called it, not he, they would have called it mitral valve. If you talk to a doctor within the last 10 years, they would call it the bicuspid. And if you talk to recent doctors, they will call it the left AV valve. Okay. Then you have the semilunar valves, and the semilunar valves are really cool because they're names, semilunar, half moons. So they look like this. That's why they're called the semilunar valve. One opens up to the lung, and that's why it's called the pulmonary, because the term pulmonary means lung, pulmonary semilunar valve, and the other one opens up to the aorta. So that's why it's called the aortic semilunar valve. Okay? Now the AV valves are just flaps like this. And because the AV valves are flaps, so if the pressure is too high, the flaps can, open up the opposite side. So always associate with AV valves, you have what? What holds them down?
Pressure?
No. The pressure would cause them to kind of flip upside down.
Is it the cord thing that holds them down? I can't think of the first name.
That's okay. You did 90% of the way. So they're called tendinous cords, or the old term for them was chordae tendineae. That's the term I learned, but I had to correct that to teach you the new term that's found in your textbook, which is called the tendinous cords. Okay, so the tendinous cords and the papillary muscles in the ventricle, these are the things that are associated with the AV valves. Okay, so for example, here's one here. Oh, what happened to my pen? Oh, crud. Okay, my pen stopped working. No mas. Let me see if I can deactivate it. Oh, good. Okay. Oops. Here you go. So there's the tendinous cords here. There's the tendinous cords here, and they're attached to the papillary muscles. Just so that they don't, the flaps don't flip back up the other way. All right. So those are the valves. So here are your tricuspid. Oh, sorry. That should be, 1A, 1A, 1B, 1B, 2A, 2A, 2B, 2B. There's your tricuspid. 2A on the right-hand side is your tricuspid or your right AV valve. 2A on your, if you're looking at it, on your right-hand side would be the left, because remember, anatomical position, you'd have to flip it, okay? So always remember that this is the right side and this is the left side. All right, so 2A on this side right here, that's the right AV, and 2A on this side is the left AV. Otherwise, the tricuspid and the bicuspid. Then you have the semilunar valves right here on the right-hand side, the 2B. That one specifically would be the pulmonary valve. It used to be called the pulmonary semilunar valve, but because that was too long, they just shortened it to the pulmonary valve. And then 2B on the left side would be the aortic valve, okay? All right, so that's that. So we have the valve, and now we have the third thing that we're going to study, which is the blood vessels. Okay, so with the blood vessels, we have one over here and one down here. So we're going to call that, we'll do, what would make sense? Let's do 3A. So 3A here and 3A here. So 3A has two parts, the superior and inferior. So the top one would be the superior vena cava, and the bottom one would be the inferior vena cava. Okay, so both of the vena cavas would be carrying blood from the body. So is it going to be oxygenated or deoxygenated?
Deoxygenated?
Perfect. So the blood is going to come in here from the body and come from here. Okay. So we're going to do the blood flow as well as we're doing the blood vessels. Okay. So the superior and inferior vena cava brings deoxygenated blood from the body into the right atrium. Once it goes into the right atrium, it's going to pass through this valve. What valve is that?
The tricuspid.
Perfect. It's going to enter into this chamber, which is called the
Right ventricle.
perfect. Moves through this valve, which is called the
Aortic valve. Or
careful.
pulmonary.
There you go.
Yeah.
Goes to the pulmonary valve, and that allows it to pass through 3B, and 3B is the because it's going to the lungs, right? So it's going to be the pulmonary. Now, technically, it's moving away from the body, so I would technically call it the pulmonary artery, but it's going to branch. And anytime you have something that's going to branch, it's got to be called what? The pulmonary
Trunk.
Yes. Okay. So the pulmonary trunk is then going to branch into 3C and 3C here. One to the right and one to the left. But 3C is going to be what? Now at this point you can call it what? Because it's moving away from the heart.
The pulmonary artery.
Perfect. So you have a right pulmonary artery and a left pulmonary artery. It's going to go to the lungs. You're going to breathe in. There's going to be gas exchange happening. It's going to come back through these valves right here. I'm sorry, through this blood vessel right here, which is going to be 3, where are we? 3 A, B, C, D, 3D here, and 3D here. So what's 3D?
Pulmonary veins.
Perfect. Okay, you have the right pulmonary vein and you have the left pulmonary vein. What kind of blood is it going to carry back?
Oxygenated.
Beautiful. And it's going to bring it to what blood? I'm sorry, what chamber?
Left atrium.
Beautiful. Pass through what blood vessel? What valve?
Bicuspid.
Go up what other valve?
Aortic.
The aortic valve, and that allows it to enter into 3E. 3E. What's 3E?
The aortic artery. No.
Just the aorta.
The aorta.
Now the aorta has parts to it. So you have the ascending aorta. You have the arch of aorta, or the aortic arch. And then you have the descending aorta. Now the aortic arch, or the arch of aorta, has three main branches. The first branch is called the brachiocephalic trunk. Brachiocephalic trunk. That's going to divide into the right subclavian and the right common carotid. And then the second branch is going to go to the head. So that's going to be the the left common carotid. And then the third one is going to be the left subclavian. So your whole upper body is covered through this. Okay. So 3E here would be the ascending, 3E here, 3E. I didn't give myself enough room to draw the branches, but that would be the aortic arch. And then when it moves downwards, 3E here, that would be the descending. Okay. So we covered all of the heart as well as blood flow. How's that? Did that answer your question about blood flow?
Yep, that's exactly what I wanted, just to kind of walk through it again. It's easier when I can see it and have somebody talking about it at the same time.
Oh, yes, absolutely. In motion. Yep. Okay. All right. So the last question, the last question is on systemic gas exchange. So I have just enough time to go through the respiratory. Before I spend some time on that, I'm just going to go through a few more things, okay? So you have make sure you know the cardiac conduction as well as the EKG, and then the blood vessels. For the blood vessels, I recommend using something like this, okay? So a cognitive map. So not a lot of you, some of you presented on this, and you went through it, but you didn't cover it in like the detail that you need to know. So make sure that when you're going through the blood vessel, you know the function, the layers, as well as the unique characteristics, and they're all connected. The layers explain the reason for its unique characteristics. Okay, so go through this cognitive map. For respiratory, make sure you know the function of the respiratory system. Your worksheet is not required. Did you do a worksheet for respiratory? I can't remember now. I think you did, right? Yeah, you did, because I'm grading it right now for one of your classes. Okay, so the worksheet asks you to go through the parts of the respiratory system as well as the linings. So make sure you do the worksheet for that. And then in terms of ventilation, that's how you inhale and exhale. And the request is for gas exchange. So I'm going to talk about this. Before I talk about gas exchange, though, I want to make sure that you cover all of this as well for the digestive system. Okay. So in the digestive system, make sure it's my favorite chapter, because what's better than to eat, right? So that's why students do really well in this chapter overall. It has a lot of details. I'm not going to lie. Lots and lots of detail, but it's fun because you can really understand what happens when you eat food and how it's broken down. Okay. So make sure you know the function of the digestive system, know the digestive tract from order of superficial to deep. And that's what one of your classmates asked about. And for that, I just mean like mucosa, submucosa, muscularis, and serosa. Okay, so knowing those layers. Knowing how food moves through your body. So how it goes through the mouth, the pharynx, the esophagus, the stomach, and then knowing the accessory organs before it ends up in the small intestine and then the large intestine. Make sure you know how chemically things get broken down. And to help you with that, there's this chart right here that you can do that goes through the organs as well as the function and then the characteristics. Okay. So let's go back to the respiratory and do gas exchange. Okay. I don't know what happened to my pen. There we go. All right. So let's go through gas exchange. Ventilation. Here we go. Gas exchange. So understand systemic gas exchange, you have to understand pulmonary gas exchange. Okay, so we'll do both. Pulmonary and then systemic. So pulmonary gas exchange is between the lungs and blood vessel. Whereas systemic gas exchange is between the body and blood vessels. Okay. So in pulmonary gas exchange, it occurs where? What site along the respiratory system does it occur at?
The alveoli.
Beautiful. Thank you. Okay. So here I have the alveoli. Actually, no, I'm going to do a different color for this. Okay. And I'm going to have my blood vessels. What blood vessel would this be, by the way?
Capillaries?
Not yet. Just when it enters into the lungs first. So this one right here.
Oh, that'll be the bronchial. The bronchioles.
Now you're telling me the respiratory tract. I just want the blood vessel. What blood vessel brings deoxygenated blood into the lungs?
I forgot.
Anyone can help out. Go back here.
Superior and inferior vena cava.
Nope, ma'am. That brings it to the heart. Which one brings it to the lungs? So it's this one right here.
Oh, the pulmonary
Yeah, that would be the
artery?
pulmonary veins.
Absolutely. That would be the pulmonary arteries. Remember, because it's moving away from the arteries, carry blood away from the heart. And in this case, it's pulmonary because it's going towards the lungs. So the pulmonary artery would be high in what gas?
Carbon dioxide?
Yep. And low in,
Oxygen.
that's right. Take a deep breath. So when you take a deep breath in your lungs, you're going to be high in what?
Oxygen?
Yes, ma'am. And low in.
Carbon dioxide.
Right. That is exactly it. So when the gases go from the pulmonary arteries to what you said earlier, which was capillaries, let's make this one capillaries. You're going to have diffusion. Okay. Why? Because carbon dioxide is high in the blood vessels. The carbon dioxide here is going to move this way. Okay, because it goes from high to where it's low. Where the oxygen is high here, but low here, so it's going to move in here. Okay, so that happens at capillaries because that's the site of gas exchange. Now, after that, so what leaves the lungs then? What blood vessel is going to carry blood from the lungs to the heart again?
The pulmonary veins?
Yes, ma'am. The pulmonary veins are now going to be high in what after the exchange has happened?
Oxygen?
And low in?
Carbon dioxide.
Yes. And that's what gets put through the body then, right? The heart's going to pump. So here's the heart. So the heart is going to pump the blood throughout the body. And once you get to the body, here are the cells of the body. Okay. The body is going to undergo metabolism. So when it undergoes metabolism, it's going to use up oxygen and produce a lot of what?
Carbon dioxide?
That's right. So it's going to become low in oxygen and high in carbon dioxide. Okay. So then the blood vessel is going to carry oxygen to the cells of the body. And it's going to take away what?
The carbon dioxide?
Yep. And that's what it shuttles back to where?
It goes back to high oxygen and low.
Nope. It's going to go back to the heart so that the heart can repeat this process.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yep. And that's why it's called a closed circuit. Okay. It goes only in one direction. It is a closed circuit for this very reason. It's uploading and unloading carbon dioxide and oxygen at all times.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much.
Yep. So there may be a test question on the respiratory membrane. So then we might as well cover that. So in terms of the respiratory membrane, what makes up the respiratory membrane? So we know it's between the alveoli and the capillary, right? So the alveoli is going to consist of what cells that allow for gas exchange? You have the squamous alveolar cells.
The
Remember
great.
So the great alveolar cells do what? They're not part of the gas exchange.
They have the fluid thing, right?
Yes, ma'am. They produce a surfactant, which prevents the alveoli from sticking to each other when you exhale and the alveoli collapses. Okay? So there are three types of cells that you find in the alveoli: the squamous alveolar cells, the great alveolar cells, and the dust cells or the macrophage cells, alveolar cells. So of those three, the great alveolar cells produce the surfactant. The squamous alveolar cells, those are the simple squamous ones, and they're thin because they are meant to allow for that exchange to happen. So the respiratory membrane consists of the squamous alveolar cell, and then between them there's a basement layer, and then you have the capillary, which essentially is the endothelium. So that's what makes up the respiratory membrane: the squamous alveolar cells, the basement membrane, and the endothelium of the capillary. Okay? All right. Wow. I only went over by 2 minutes. Woo! Okay. Any other questions before we conclude?